It's a love story that began more than a half-century ago in a country far, far away.
I was born in Yugoslavia in 1925, and during the time we have to leave the country because we were German ascent, and then the war was over, but the German pulled us out of there, and we have to flee for days and days till we finally arrived in Germany.
I was born in Yugoslavia also, born in 1923, and then I went through school, and after school I learned a trade for 4 years, a weaver. And in 1941, when the Germans came through, and then I went to Germany in 1941 in December, shortly before Christmas. And then I learned the trade over there as a tool and die maker.
Peter and Elizabeth met on Christmas Eve in 1945 in a German refugee camp. 6 months later, in June 1946, they were to be married.
And now while we got supposed to get married, I didn't have any gown. That time you couldn't buy anything because Germany was nothing. Everything was destroyed. But luckily I had a white skirt, and a seamstress from his village, she made from the skirt a gown for me, a wedding gown. But now we have the gown and everything settled. And so now, you know how these brides, you want to have a veil. And without the veil, it's almost... So then in Stuttgart was a factory who produced the gauze for bandages and so. And then somebody came up and have a piece of the gauze, and they make a veil for me to get married.
As for Peter's attire,
There was a Jewish kitchen, a Jewish refugee camp also. And they've been looking for help, so I worked in the kitchen over there. And there I met a soldier, an American soldier, and he was just about ready to go back home to the United States. And he had some clothes along and said, I'm not going to take all that stuff along. He said, I'll leave it over here. And he gave me a suit, but he was wearing, and it was my wedding suit.
what's a wedding without a reception?
We have about 21 people, and like I said, we have about 2 chickens, and 2 chickens were all make like soup and stew and feed everybody just a little, and cakes and all.
And then came the honeymoon.
After the wedding was over, so now, you know, people go on a honeymoon, so where are we gonna go? There are people with us in one room. So we had a woodshed made, across the road was a woodshed, and there we spent our honeymoon in the woodshed.
2 children, and several years later, a friend of Peter's told him that as hard as he worked, he could make more money working in the United States. So he approached Elizabeth with the idea.
So then he came home and telling me all this story and said, well, I'm going, how about if I go by myself and establish things, a house and everything, and then you and the kids, those 2 kids, my son and daughter, you come afterwards. And I just sit there and look at me with my mouth open. I say, what? I say, you ain't going by yourself. If you go, we're all going, or the none of us gonna go.
On January 12, 1957, Peter and Elizabeth boarded a boat heading for New York's Ellis Island. 10 days and 10 nights later, they arrived. They soon boarded a train to Rochester, New York, where they planned to earn their slice of the American pie. The first thing Peter did when he arrived in Rochester was to get a job.
He said, okay, come and show you the job, what you're going to do. So he hired me, and I was over there ready working for 2 days. I didn't even know how much he's going to pay me, nothing. I got a job. It's all that counts, okay?
Elizabeth worked at a telephone company during the evenings and took care of the family, which included doing the grocery shopping.
I like kind of tuna fish can, you know, so I look around, so I saw it say tuna, and I took those cans and put it in my shopping cart. And then when we got to the checkout counter, the pastor's wife was watching me, and so, and then all of a sudden I got this tuna, and she looked at me and she said, no good, no good. And I thought, wow, what's wrong now? She said, this is for meow, for the cats. So I got tuna for the cats.
Within 6 months, the Heimanns had learned how to speak English, and in little more than a year, they saved enough to purchase their first home and had had their third child. Peter retired in 1983, and Elizabeth and Peter moved to Hendersonville in 1994. When asked about their long, successful marriage, Elizabeth and Peter had this to share.
53 years. And so far we are still married, and I hope this continue going like this till the Lord calls us home. Sometimes I wonder who is going to get first, him or me. I say, if I go, don't you dare get married again. I haunt you. So we were just so blessed.
We were raised this way from back home. In Yugoslavia, we had very seldom or none existing divorces. There was no such thing in those days. And because if you made a promise, you kept that promise forever.